Hello world, it's Wednesday, July 8th, 2026, and here's what happened this week in PHP Internals. This week's episode is brought to you by Ballast. Your team ships constantly, but how much of that work actually lasts? Ballast reads your Git history and computes a deterministic durability score. Does shipped code hold up, or does it churn and get redone? Ballast is in early access now at ballast.now. This week's top story is still Gina P. Banyard's deprecations for PHP 8.6, the annual bundle where every removal gets its own ballot, and this week it caught fire twice. First fire, the long array question. With Stephanie Gamati's list deprecation already on the table, Tim Dusterhuis floated the draft that turns array into a real cast function, and Michael Morris erupted at where that road leads. He asked, "Are you crazy?" Deprecating array would, by his math, torch 3/4 of WordPress core and nearly every plugin. Safe's counter was all receipts. The rewrite is one AST grep command, array and square brackets compiled to byte identical opcodes, and for the record, the proposal is just to deprecate list, not array. Then Juliet Reinders-Fulmer, who maintains the WordPress coding standards, corrected everyone. WordPress still supports PHP 7.4, and short arrays were blocked there for years by a handful of core committers, not the community. It got personal. Morris told Safe to step out of his ivory tower. Safe kept answering with engineering. He wrote, "I've written a compiler that migrated a multi-million-line codebase from one language to another automatically overnight. Swapping one AST node for another that is literally equivalent to the compiler is not a feat of engineering courage." To Morris' credit, when told he was turning it personal, he replied, "I am, and I apologize," and the thread cooled. Then Monday, it reignited over evidence. Gina regrouped the list, folded in new items sent to her directly, and set the clock. "If none are added or amended, I will initiate a call to vote next week." Rowan Tommins counted 35 proposals and only 8 with any discussion of who'd be affected, and threatened to cast 27 blanket no votes. Gina drew her line. "You are free to do as you please." She won't produce metrics for the sake of metrics without an agreed method. Rowan held firm. "I do not think we should be removing features without asking who will be affected. I'm honestly shocked that that's a controversial opinion." Juliet, once again the bridge, renewed her offer to generate real impact data with PHP compatibility, feasible, she says, for about 25 of the 36 items. One item on its way out, the by reference return modifier deprecation, Bob Wynand recommended a complete retraction, and its proposer has already offered one. The RFC freezes July 13th. Expect the call to vote next week, though with the mandatory 14-day cooldown after Gina's latest changes, actual ballots open July 21st at the earliest. Tim Dusterhuis and Derek Reithen's time duration class, the stopwatch value object aimed at 8.6, got called done this week. "We consider the RFC to be complete," they said. The final decisions, add and sub, won an informal PHP Foundation Slack poll unanimously. The past tense method suffixes are gone. Divide into got pushed to future scope, and the ban on negative constructor arguments stays on Derek's call. One naming question goes to the voters as a secondary vote. Full names like multiply by and absolute, or abbreviations like mul and abs, with the abbreviations needing a 2/3 supermajority. But one fight would not close. From seconds. It takes seconds plus a nanoseconds argument capped at 999,999,999. Overflow is rejected, not carried. Mark B objected. "It makes it simple to reason about for you as implementing it. It forces the burden to the one using the API." Pierre Joy brought prior art. Java and Rust both carry the overflow instead of rejecting it, and JavaScript's temporal doesn't impose the cap either. Tim's defense: an injective constructor means one value, one spelling. A form asking for seconds should reject out-of-range input the same way June 31st should be rejected, not silently become July 1st. Neither side budged, and with the RFC complete, that question rides along to the vote. Function-autoloading now has two competing designs. and they met in the same inbox on the same day. Paul M. Jones updated his Mark V RFC, that's attempt number 5, adding a declare strict namespace equals 1 directive to kill the global fallback edge case, plus research across the top 1,000 packages. Exactly 2 packages and 8 call sites would misbehave. Meanwhile, Michael Morris, fresh off the deprecations thread, had floated an idea on July 2nd, saying, "An idea that popped into my head an hour ago that I don't have proper PHP dev to talk to about. What if you could register a function that's called by PHP the first time it sees a namespace declared?" 5 days later, that spitball was a formal draft, autoloader callbacks that take 2 arguments, the class and the namespace. Firing the first time the engine meets a namespace, and within hours of Paul's update, Morris was in Paul's thread advertising his rival. The reason the spitball grew legs is Rowan Tommins. His endorsement became the backbone of Morris' draft. He wrote, "This really nicely sidesteps the global versus namespace sequence problem that function-autoloading always runs into. By the time the engine reaches an unqualified name, the namespace loader has already run for the current namespace and defined any functions it wants." Not everyone sold. Alexander Machniak flagged that passing null to existing string-typed autoloaders is itself a BC break, and Alex Rock argued the draft bundles 2 different proposals and called it overkill. Morris' reply had some edge, and you've misread the proposal entirely. The busiest brand new thread, Matheus Martins revived type closures. Write closure int returning bool as a parameter type, and a mismatched callback fails at the boundary with a clean type error instead of exploding deep inside your filter. The reception was warm. Matthew Wire-O'Finney would find it very useful, and Larry Garfield is in favor, to nobody's surprise. Rob Landers suggested waiting for generics. Safe pointed out that you would need variadic generics, which have never appeared in any proposal. Waiting for generics means waiting indefinitely. Larry was blunter. Generic syntax is the wrong format to use for this, full stop. The real villain is the lexer. Inside closure int, that int is a cast token. Osama Aldemiri, who's been down this exact tunnel, put it memorably. So the natural spelling is, unfortunately, the engine hostile one. So here's where it landed. Inline signatures first, named type aliases later, and neither blocks the other. Larry preempted the objection everyone could see coming. If someone gets fussy about long signatures, the answer should be, "That's nice, go work on aliases then and don't block this RFC." By Monday, he'd added just one ask. Invocable objects should fit through the same door, not get squeezed through closures. Rob Landers' primary constructors, the constructor hoisted into the class line, spent June fighting over whether it may carry a body. This week, that fight hit its endgame. In a single day of posts, Rowan Tommins came off the fence. With a body bolted on, he'd be a definite no. Rob, the author, declined to relitigate. "All I can say is that I reject it for future scope repeatedly." Nick Stott stood down under protest, warning, "We don't need more half-finished, half-not-working, confusing features in PHP." And then, quietly, the week's one unreserved fan, a reader who wrote that extending third-party classes and calling the parent constructor by hand always felt dirty. The thread's been silent since July 1st. Michael Krall's Scalar Object Methods, 3 Power 2, dispatched at compile time, came back for round 2, and the room steered it somewhere new. Michael gave real ground. He'd restrict or drop the file order dependent form and lean on typed locals for safety. Safe stayed unmoved, arguing, "Seeing $s_trim where $s is a string, I should know it works. A construct where identical AST dispatches or doesn't, depending on file position, a redundant cast, or whether a declaration sits above or below the call is not something people can reason about." Then Larry Garfield reframed the whole conversation. "A small curated set of methods," he said, "is bike shed bait and needlessly limiting." And counterpitched Kotlin-style extension functions on any type from a design he drafted with Sarah Goldman. Michael's response? Genuinely interested. They're talking off-list once Larry's back from vacation. To the scoreboard. 1 ballot closed, 1 never opened. Jordy Kroon's third-party extension documentation RFC is in, 26-1, with one abstention. The secondaries are settled too. The docs land on php.net subpaths rather than a new subdomain, 15-8, and the old user notes get dropped in the move, 21-4. Meanwhile, the grapheme mask votes that was announced for July 3rd, as far as we can tell, it never happened. The RFC page still says draft, and the feedback stayed kind but firm. Yuya Hamada wrote, "Thank you very much for your RFC, but move to voting phases too fast. The pipeline ahead is stacked. Deprecations expects its call to vote next week, and Duration finishes its cooldown just in time for the mid-August freeze." Quick hits, and there are a lot of them, so this is a two-slide round. July 2nd was Patch Day, security releases for 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, and 8.5, and 8.6.0 Alpha 1 is out for testing. Eric Norris and Tim Dusterhuis published the minimum supported versions RFC, newer AutoConf and MySQL 5.7.3 or MariaDB 10.2.8 for persistent connections, and an anonymous tester promptly found a real connection leak on old MySQL, declaring, "There is connection leak here." Eric's tracked down the cause and is weighing a fix. Nicholas Grekas redesigned serializable closures and offered a slimmed-down fallback, nudging the list that 8.6 won't wait. Osama Aldemiri floated preg throw-on error flag, implementation already built, and Nick Sadat posted a tiny RFC, default values on read-only properties, a 5-line removal, 0 replies so far. Still going. Literal scalar types turned into an enums versus literals standoff, where Nick warned, "We should not make PHP another TypeScript." Ben Ramsey added a foundation SIGs question to working groups and wanted feedback before he votes it, or withdraws it. The DTLS experiment graduated to a working 1.2 branch. Jakub Zelenko wants a draft PR. Pierre Joyce synced bundled GD with libgd 2.4 and is untangling Windows dependencies. Pratik Bujel's terminal helpers got Derek's blessing. Ship it via Pi since Peckle takes no new packages. And Pratik also asked whether fixing scanf's %c whitespace bug in place since PHP 4.3.2 breaks everyone on master. So that's the week. A deprecations list that fought about WordPress and then about evidence with the call to vote days away. A duration RFC wrapped up and waiting out its cooldown. 2 rival answers to function-autoloading colliding in real time. Typed closures winning the room while the Lexer holds the door. And the one ballot that closed passing 26-1. Links to every thread are below. We're Artisan Build. See you next week.